pressure is on me. Do something about corruption. Then I sit back and I ask myself, okay, show me an administration since independence that has taken action on corruption like I have done. Ni nini ingine mnataka? Wewe ni nini unataka? Sema. Ni nini umekosa? Who does? Si ni nini? What does that got to do with me? What does it got to do? I don't even have power, like I said, to appoint you or to sack you. So, mnataka nifanye nini jameni? That I have not done.
Munataka president afanye nini? A couple of years down the line, very little has changed. You still have the president lamenting, talking about his CSS in a manner likely to suggest that his hands may be tied or there's very little to do. We're having this conversation this evening with Didmas Barasa, Member of Parliament, Kimilili. We also have Professor George Wajakoya. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on The Big Story this evening. Mheshimiwa, let me begin with you. That is the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the Republic of Kenya. And listening into that conversation that Sophia had with Kutuni, Mheshimiwa Kutuni, it's almost like this is a president whose hands are tied.
I think what is really happening is that the president has lost control over his government completely, and this is largely because of a scenario where what is happening, we can only equate it to a scenario where a man who has lived with his wife for very many years and have children picks Mpango Kando on the roadside, brings them Mpango Kando in the compound, and then Mpango Kando beginning to claim that the children are emaciated, the children are not good, and they both connive to wanting to drive the children away. And because this Mpango Kando's interest is not to see the children grow, but the interest of the Mpango Kando is to occupy the territory and make the home as if they are the one who wants the home belongs to them. Because if you look at immediately after the handshake, it's appearing as if the president only came out of slumber after the handshake. And after the handshake, you saw the choir masters of ODM beginning to make backlash, attacking the deputy president, saying that he is corrupt, as if they were privy of what the DCI was doing. And the reason as to why we are saying that this war against corruption is targeting the deputy president is because from the time this matter was tweeted, the matter was leaked to the social media and through the press conferences that they are investigating a number of cases, is now more than, is going to 3 months down the line. And I believe that if for sure we have evidence as is being, proclaimed in the media, then these people could have been taken to court. And if you look at the deputy president from where I sit, he is not an accounting officer. And the fact that the DCI has already summoned a number of cabinet ministers, to me, I think that is just a ploy, because the accounting officers are permanent secretaries. These are the people that should first be summoned to DCI to explain what was happening with them. And this business of crying every day that I will arrest you even if you are my political ally, I will arrest you if you are my brother, we've had enough of these things. This country should not be treated to becoming, a crying nation. The president has all the powers, he has all the instruments to really fight corruption by supporting the agencies to do so and even giving them a deadline.
Mheshimiwa, the handshake of the anniversary was a couple of weeks ago, so that means that handshake was had a year ago. So when you talk about Mpango Kando couldn't quote, and you're saying that is the reason why probably the president is not responsive to what's happening to his government, then that brings to the question, what used to happen before the handshake?
This government was being run by President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto in line with the provisions of the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya. But immediately after these strangers, I will call them strangers and foreigners because they were not part and parcel of this government, and their roles in this government is not really, it's not defined. What they are doing is that they are infringing on the roles that is supposed to be played by civil servants. They are not civil servants. They are members of the opposition parties, and they have made it clearly that what they want to do is that they want to forge a political unity with the President Uhuru Kenyatta that will see them either, being assisted to form the next government. So what they are doing in the government is to plant, they have already planted the seeds of deceit, the seeds of divisions.
All right, so we are derailing from this conversation because I've asked you a very direct question that the handshake was a year ago. So before the handshake, the president still had CSS who were not performing, who he was not happy with, and still nothing was happening. We saw that clip from 2016. We've had him lamenting of Agriculture CS Mwangi Kiunjuri. Very little has changed. Professor, what are your thoughts?
Thank you very much, Linda. I'm very grateful to be in the studio today. Before I make my comments, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Peter Tabichi for having made our teachers excel in the world, and would also like to encourage teachers to emulate his example. Now, when it comes to this kind of discussion that we are having today, and without prejudice, I would like to say that equity requires clean hands. When we talk of Raila and talk of Ruto and talk of personalities, that is not going to help in this country. Ruto should first of all step aside, and should step aside immediately, because he is the one who is causing problems in this country. The ministers he brought in parliament, in government, are the ones who had unclean hands, right from the Minister for Energy. When energy instruments were going down the drain, that particular minister never issued any statement. There's no single day Ruto has come up to issue a statement to denounce corruption. What he has done is he's taken a different narrative, thinking that Kenyans are fools. Kenyans are no longer fools. We are no longer fearful. We are ready to die for this country. The country has gone down in a very serious note. And when we see this payukering of some of these MPs who came from nowhere, trying to tell Kenyans that they have a disposition to play, then Kenyans should come up and support His Excellency the President. The President is not alone. And when they touch on Kinoti by saying that Kinoti is an agent of doom, they are themselves going to see Kinoti's hands into them. The fearful factor today is what is making the likes of Murkomen coming out to attack the DCI. But Prof, sorry to mention names.
Prof, we are really derailing this conversation because this conversation, we are having a conversation about Deputy President William Ruto, which essentially shouldn't be the case. We should be having a conversation about President Uhuru Kenyatta and why he seems unable, to speak. I
was coming to that.
Yes, please.
I had to lay the foundation. I'm a lawyer, remember that.
Yeah.
I don't just talk from the script that has no foundation. The President is not a lame duck. The President has tried. But the problem is, his initial 5-year term was concocted with some of these advisors I see now lamenting today. They're the ones who let the president down. He ought to have built a very strong foundation. And this also shows that picking anybody from the street and making him a cabinet secretary is something that we have learned from. Cabinet secretaries during Moi's time were men of honor and value. Cabinet secretaries should actually be appointed with the maturity, experience, and they should actually be from parliament. Not just picking up some of these Form 2 dropouts, you put them in parliament and they start just fattening up like there's no problem. So the president has done a good job. The only part that we cannot keep on lamenting is, what do we do to help the president? Must we leave him alone to be talking all the time? What can I stand up, come up and ask Kenyans, look, the president has done his part. What is my part? Must we be following stories? We are in an issue, in an era of predictable surprises, as we call them in criminal justice. So we should actually give the president an opportunity to explore.
Mheshimiwa, the question then that comes to mind is, what should the president be doing instead of giving warnings and lamenting? What should he do to fix his government?
I think I want to be very clear on these matters.
Please.
In this country, we have constitutional officers that are responsible to ensure that whatever money is made available for development is properly utilized. We have an office of the Auditor General of the Republic of Kenya that has the responsibility and gets money from Parliament to carry out auditing of all the state corporations in this country. And I think the President has all the tools at his disposal. He can call for a report, Auditor General's report, on any of his ministry that he feels money could have been lost, and he has the powers to act as per the report from the Auditor General. And as Kenyans, we must run away from the culture of making recommendations based on nothing. We should make recommendations, call people names, call people thieves, call people that you have embezzled public money on the basis of a document that has come from a constitutional office, either from DCI or from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution or EACC or from the Office of Auditor General. Because today, if you say so-and-so has stolen, based on what document, based on what report that you are saying so-and-so has stolen money. So I think we are not short of options in terms of what we should do or in terms of who has stolen money. Every day in the Parliament, wherever we are sitting, the leader of a government, the leader of a majority party, the Honorable Duale, tables reports from the Auditor General. And those reports have recommendations and a clear English in terms of how much money has already been accounted for. So these are things which we should move in complete respect of the rule of law. Otherwise, what is the point of having the Office of the Auditor General if we are lynching people on social media, on televisions, in funerals, in public functions? We must really move away from such kind of things.
Mheshimiwa, so basically what you're saying is that cabinet secretaries and individual state officers who have been mentioned in corrupt dealings should be left alone to still work until it can be proven beyond reasonable doubt that they were actually involved?
Absolutely. And
compare this with 2015 when the president asked cabinet secretaries to step aside?
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying you really go to ask someone to step aside or maybe ask somebody to be prosecuted on the basis of some report, either from the Auditor General, the President himself. In the Office of the President, we have an efficient monitoring unit. What is their work? Their role is to really audit government projects, how much money was allocated, the percentage of work done, how much money had been paid out. And if the parameters don't really indicate that this money had been properly utilized, then an action has to be taken, either by dismissing those people from their various offices or forwarding the same recommendation to the DCI so that they can be formally be prosecuted and being dismissed. But I want to tell Kenyans, the reason as to why DCI has taken over the role of AACC is because the Office of DCI doesn't enjoy security of tenure. The Office of the Director of DCI doesn't have their own budget. Their budget comes from the Office of the President. They have no security of tenure. They can be fired any time of the day. So they are easily manipulable. You can easily manipulate them that I want this direction to go this direction. And the fact that they have taken quite a long time to arraign people in court from the time this matter was reported in the media that this money is lost, it completely indicates that they are on a fishing expedition. They do not have the required evidence, but they are just cooking up something. And I want to tell my good friend, Professor Wajakoya, that if indeed it is true that the Republic of Kenya, the government of Kenya has lost such amount of money, the money that we have read in the media or the newspapers, then I don't think the government should continue in existence. What should happen is the government should be dissolved so that we go back to the elections, because we never elected thieves. Everybody that was given a position in government, their role was to bring development and to exercise prudence management of financial resources. So if this money is for sure is lost, then I want to assure you that this government that is in place, the government will have lost moral authority. They have no local standard to continue calling themselves government. They should just dissolve and go back to the elections.
Professor, so Mheshimiwa says until we have some of the allegations can be proven beyond reasonable doubt, then no one should step aside. And I'm having this in mind with the fact that they have been called that perhaps some cabinet secretaries need to step aside to allow for investigations into their ministries. And I'm having this conversation with you as well with Chapter 6 of the Constitution in mind. What are your thoughts?
I think, Linda, thank you very much for asking me that question. First and foremost, I would speak as a person who has lived outside this country for many years, as a person who has seen what happens in countries like UK and the United States, and also look at the countries like Botswana, Malaysia and India, where real life happens. This country has got mediocre ministers who are recycled materials, people who have lost in life, people who have no destiny, people who have no moral responsibility, who are recycled and appointed by who? That's the question I want to ask you. Appointed by the very, very people that they become tenacious sycophants of them. Now, if you appoint somebody who has come in through lobbyists, how do you expect that person to work for the people of this country? That's why people like myself will never accept any cabinet appointment in this country until things are resolved. How do you expect people like us to share same cabinet room with the people we know that are suspect? Secondly, and I mean it very seriously, the issue of saying that we should have evidence from the Auditor General, we should have evidence from the Attorney General and what have you, is just a joke. And I'm not trying to speak against my fellow friend from my place, the Member of Parliament who is on the other side of the aisle. Those who are selected and appointed have no moral authority. Number 3, when you go to Chapter 6 of the Constitution, there is always manipulation during the elections. Chapter 6 requires people to have certain kind of education levels. But if you go to Parliament today, trust me, the majority of these same people, they don't have the qualifications. Then how did they become members of Parliament? What moral authority do they have to speak for us when they are tainted, first of all, when they are there as fugitives of emancipation?
Okay, so basically listening to you, what you're saying is that any individual, public official who's mentioned in any corrupt dealing, A, should step aside, and B, probably if it's within the powers of the president, especially with the cabinet secretaries, they may need to step aside.
They should step aside. There's another day when a Secretary of State in England went to Parliament 3 minutes late, and his apology to members of the House of Commons came with a resignation. He said, "I'm very sorry, I will resign." It was not until he was upon not to resign. Going to church, for example, if you go to church 5 minutes late, you have sinned, because that sin is equivalent to murder. Now, stepping aside is a moral responsibility. You don't need to be told to step aside. There are ministers I know that if I were the president of this country today, I would fire them and ask the director of criminal investigation to tail them and take them to jail. The president sometimes needs to listen to voices of reason. He's crying, he's alone, we support him. But what is he doing? Fire these people immediately. Just fire them and Kenyans will support you. But don't keep on singing. If you don't have people to advise you, call me for 2 days and you'll see how this country will change.
Mheshimiwa, you get the final word in this conversation.
Linda, I want to agree with the professor that any government officer mentioned in corruption should step aside. But my point of departure from him is mentioned by who? Mentioned by Raila Odinga, mentioned by Didmas, or mentioned by who? We must be specific. Well, when we are saying that when a government official, a government minister is mentioned, that mention must be done by a constitutional body that has the responsibility, that have the local standard to mention that this money is lost. And that can only be the Office of the Auditor General. That can only be the Office of Efficiency Monitoring Unit or a various internal audit departments of government. But not to think that anybody mentioned in a funeral, you should step aside. To me, I think that is completely pedestrian. And this is the only way where I have usually have a problem with people who come to this country from abroad. because they want to impose their culture into this country, a culture which is not anchored within the law. The law in this country is very clear on which institution has the mandate, has the capacity to audit financial management of a state corporation. It's not just anybody. Because tomorrow, if I don't like, if Wajakoya will be appointed minister, and I don't like the way he appears, maybe we have differences elsewhere. Then when I'm attending a funeral in my constituency, I say, Wajakoya is corrupt, should step aside. Does it mean that Wajakoya will step aside? We can't lead this country that way. This country must be led and run by institutions, by law, and by procedures and policies that are friendly, that doesn't really infringe on the Bill of Rights of Kenyans.
Okay. So as I wrap this up, Mheshimiwa, from where you sit, is there anything wrong with stepping aside? I mean, after all, at the end of the day, if you're clean, you'll get cleared. You'll still get your job back.
There are positions where you don't really have to step aside. If a report from Auditor General indicates that a colossal amount of money has been lost under your watch, there is no point of stepping aside. You should be relieved of your duty. Because stepping aside, we've seen very many people stepping aside, but when they come back again, money is lost. So what we are saying is that any damning report from a constitutionally mandated office that so-and-so is corrupt, so-and-so has stolen public money, this amount of money cannot be explained in terms of how this money was spent. That person should be fired, so that another Kenyan can occupy that particular office to move forward.
Right. I need to end this conversation, but thank you so much for your time. Didmas Baraza, Member of Parliament, Kimilili. A big thank you as well to Professor George Wajakoya, who was also part of this conversation. Sophia Wanuna has been our lead reporter, and she was speaking to Cherangani, Member of Parliament, Joshua Kutuni. I'm Lindo Gutu. But before I wrap this up, I want you to listen in to something that was said by ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi on the way forward for Kenya.
Na kama Wakenya tuombe, tusikize yale mahubiri na tuombe. Na viongozi wa makanisa mtuombe kabisa. Kwa sababu haya maombi ambayo yatatoka kwenu na sauti yenu ndio itatoa nyoka ya ufisadi pangoni.